He had only seen the people from the one farming village before. Still, they had seemed very different from this fishing village's people. Where the farmers were in constant terror of their overlords and seemed dirty and on the edge of survival, these fishermen seemed much better off and had a real sense of community, despite their circumstances. Sadly, that very much did not include him. They were still untrusting, bordering on hostile, but they definitely seemed to stick together. Over the following week, Nate pieced together the clues of what was happening. The fishermen supplied fish to the Bane, but they also traded some of what they had left over to nearby human villages for grain and necessities they couldn't provide for themselves. They then took a portion of that grain and delivered it to Balan for brewing or distilling. He kept a bit of the bourbon-like whiskey for himself, but sent the rest to the village, where it was stored at the pub-like home of that one fisherman family. They kept most for themselves and traded some with the nearby villages and used some to bribe their assigned Bane overseer, who came for regular inspections. Hauling grain sacks up the hill to Balan's house was quite a workout. Between that and fetching and cutting firewood from the nearby forest a couple miles inland, Nate felt like his time so far was not a complete waste. At least he was getting some good physical exercise to keep him in shape. He also spent an hour or two each evening after his cleaning and chores, running katas and practicing his sword and fighting skills as best as he could. At first, Balan ignored Nate and pretended he wasn't there. But after a couple days, his house was starting to look clean and fresh, and the scowls and frowns became less hostile and more contemplative. On the third day, he even sat outside eating the dinner Nate had fetched him from the village and watching Nate's sword practice. He seemed amused by it, and laughed occasionally, but steadfastly refused to give even the slightest hint of what Nate might improve. That went on for a week, with little change, until something he had feared came walking into the village, a Bane warrior wearing Lord Nelfontin's colors. Nate didn't know what was going on. One minute he was cleaning Balan's house, as usual. The next the man acted nearly sober and stood straight and tall. He demanded, "Hide, and do not come out, no matter what. I don't want your presence harming this village." That was when he heard a shout outside and looked through the window. He could see the Bane elf walking up the hill and shouting for Balan to come out. Nate ducked down so that he was just at eye level with the windowsill. It was all well and good for the former arena champion to tell him to hide, but Nate's magic might be the only thing that could defend them. Even from this distance he could see that the Bane had some magic spell running, though it seemed to be concentrated around the man's head. However, as he approached the house, he let the spell drop when he spotted the horse wandering around Balan's yard. Nate couldn't know how powerful the man was or what skills he might have, but he was wearing a sword and had a bow strapped to his back. Being a Bane elf, though, he could be thousands of years old and a master at everything, or he could be a junior soldier just barely old enough to serve and no more skilled than Nate. No way to tell without risking his life to find out. Keeping his head down, he watched and listened to see what would happen. This warrior was almost certainly there because of him, and there was no way they would let a human live after killing one of their kind.